Facebook is fighting back against the Australian government, which wants to force the company to pay online publishers. Now, the social media giant has restricted every user in the country, both companies and individuals, from sharing news articles. NBC News senior media reporter Dylan Byers joins us now. So, Dylan, first of all, set the stage. Tell us more about this new law that Australia is establishing and why Facebook is so against it.
Sure. Basically what Australia is trying to do here is something that a lot of countries have been trying to do, which is basically how to figure out a way to stop what they see as Facebook and Google basically cannibalizing the publishing business. The reason Facebook, and so what they want to do with this law, I should say, with this new bargaining code, is basically set up a system whereby companies like Facebook and Google are required to pay publishers a certain amount of money. The reason that Facebook takes issue with this is not because they are fundamentally opposed to paying for news. It's because they don't like the letter of the law. And if you actually get into the weeds of the law, as terrible as this looks for Facebook, it looks as though Facebook is basically deprived every Australian of their ability to access news on Facebook. If you look at the letter of the law, there are fundamental flaws to it. There are problems to it. That basically leave Facebook vulnerable and could set a precedent whereby its business would be vulnerable globally should other countries follow suit.
So how is the Australian government responding to what Facebook's now doing?
The Australian government is effectively saying that they're hoping they can continue the dialogue. They're obviously disappointed with that, but they're hoping that they continue the dialogue. And I anticipate that we haven't seen the end of this. I anticipate that Facebook and Australia will eventually come to some sort of agreement. The problem is that the agreement that Australia laid out was one, when I say Facebook was left vulnerable, what I mean, it would introduce a policy whereby Facebook would say, okay, we'll pay publishers, X amount. And then the publishers would come in and say, well, we want Y amount. And there would be an independent arbiter who would get to conclude how much money that was. And so you would have a situation where publishers were effectively asking for the moon. You repeat that globally, and all of a sudden, publishers get to effectively just take money from Facebook as they want.
And quickly, Dylan, this issue doesn't just affect Facebook. Take Google, for example, which is tackling this in a very different way. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so Google went sort of for the easier route here, which is they effectively said that they would start paying Australian publishers. And even in the case of the biggest Australian publisher, News Corp, which is owned by Rupert Murdoch, they said they would start paying globally. So that includes the Wall Street Journal in the U.S. And all of the U.K. publications. They're basically saving face. They're basically saying we're the good guys. Let's just move along with this. That differs from the Facebook policy is saying, you know what, we don't like this deal, and we want you to understand why we don't like this deal. So we're going to force the conversation.
All right, interesting issue. Dylan Byers, thanks for staying on it. We appreciate it.